Hey everybody, this is Uncle John from Your Story Hour, and I'm back to bring you another chapter from the book Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, and Still Mo by the author Sam Campbell. Today's chapter is number 9, and it's entitled Not So Good Neighbor Policy. The Squints would probably have flown into a rage if anyone had suggested the good neighbor policy to them. Judging from their actions, all neighbors fit into 3 classes: those they fear, those they ignore, and those they just plainly dislike. Those they fear are many, though our island offers a refuge from most of them. The red squirrel must ever be on guard. The hawk and eagle are on the watch for him in the daytime, and the owl seeks him at night. Weasel, marten, mink, raccoon, skunk, fox, coyote, wildcat, all predators are on the hunt for him. In the lake waters, the fierce northern pike and muskellunge count him a high prize, so old Chicory must be constantly on the alert or he doesn't last long. His quick nervous habits are due to the constant presence of danger. He is always ready to jump, run, or hide. It is small wonder that he scolds eternally a world that threatens him so much. Non-predatory animals such as the porcupine, woodchuck, and deer, Chicory just ignores. The squints would race all around Salt and Pepper, paying no more attention to them than if they were stumps. Link would eat beside them, and they would neither run from her nor at her. But as for a chipmunk or blue jay, I dare say that the squints class them below the lowest form of life. I have often wondered what those red squirrels were saying when they chattered so viciously at a chipmunk that had just taken food they wanted. Doubtless it is as well that I don't know, for it would be something not to be repeated, and certainly not to be printed. For the chipmunk and blue jay eat of the food Chicory thinks was created solely for him, and that, in his view, is an unforgivable crime. We tried, by an adjustment of the food problem, to make the squints get along well with their neighbors. Perhaps we succeeded to some degree. In the woods at large, they sometimes have savage battles with tragic results. Of course, the chipmunk, being much smaller, is generally the victim, but on our island there was not one fatal fight. There was endless wrangling, however. Whenever a chipmunk and a red squirrel saw each other, there was sure to be an argument. Sometimes it was amusing to watch. The chipmunk has an odd way of extricating himself from a bad situation. He will jump straight up in the air like a jack-in-the-box, a distance of 24 inches or more. The action is made with so little effort it looks as if some invisible string had jerked him upward. The chipmunk is the quicker of the two, and I believe the wiser. He varies his pace, dodges, comes to a sudden stop, and reverses with the skill of an open-field runner. His capacity for carrying food in his pouchy cheeks is amazing, whereas the Chicory can take only 1 peanut at a time. Chippy can take 3. One day I saw the chipmunk we call Beggar Boy provoke Stillmo until that irritable little rascal almost went insane. Beggar Boy seemed to taunt his rival deliberately. We had tossed out a handful of peanuts on the chipmunk's persistent begging, a habit of his that had led to his name. He had called to Jenny and me constantly while we were at breakfast. Because we were more interested in feeding ourselves than in feeding him, he became decidedly impatient. His chirping became louder and louder with insistence. He climbed high in a balsam tree where he could look in at us, and from there kept up his bantering. Finding us unyielding, he ran wildly about, climbed the screen door, and raced over the roof. Still, he got no results. Then, with a marvelous leap, he jumped to the windowsill outside the screen opposite our breakfast table. This was more than Jenny could stand. Calling to Beggar Boy lengthy apologies for our neglect, she carried to him a handful of peanuts, such a handful that she dropped one after another as she walked across the cabin floor. Beggar Boy knew what was coming and ran to the front door to be ready. When Jenny threw the precious food to the ground, he darted in and instantly stuffed his mouth so full that his head looked like a toy balloon. But his calls had brought him something besides this gift of food. Stillmo apparently had heard the sound. Perhaps he had a notion there might be something forthcoming in which he might want to share, or maybe he didn't like a chipmunk talking that way. Whatever stirred him, he was certainly on the warpath. He made straight for Beggar Boy, and Beggar Boy headed for the tall timber. There was a brief chase, and Stillmo lost sight of his little rival. The red squirrel began to eat a peanut. Suddenly, Beggar Boy was standing a few feet away looking at him. Stillmo dropped his peanut and gave chase again, and the chipmunk outwitted him. Stillmo endeavored to eat his tasty snack once more, but there stood that pesky chipmunk looking at him insulting-like. With a scream of rage, he charged the little fellow. Half a dozen times this whole act was repeated until the red squirrel was so mad he couldn't have digested his peanuts if he had eaten them. He grabbed one and ran away, chattering as he went, while Beggar Boy again stuffed his cheeks to the limit and began carrying away the rest of the prized food to his underground storehouse. Other times it was the red squirrel who was chased, and the chipmunk did the chasing. One day I saw Meeny sitting on a log, joyfully beginning a peanut feast. He was breaking the shell and dropping the crumbs about his feet. Just as he was about to reach the kernel and reap the reward of his labors, Stubby, our old-time chipmunk, appeared. That peanut looked pretty good to him, and he gave a drooling look in Meeny's direction. It is hard to know what prompted his action. Perhaps it was a moment of supreme courage. Maybe the desire for that luscious peanut unbalanced his reason and overcame all caution. Or it may be that he instinctively knew Meeny was in a weak mood. Anyway, he dashed at the red squirrel, squeaking a battle cry at the top of his voice. Meeny ran as never a red squirrel ran before. Stubby kept right after him. Meeny did not stop until he was at the top of the highest hemlock tree in the island, and Stubby perched below, chortling his conviction that a red squirrel isn't so tough after all. In the meantime, however, Bluey, the blue jay, had swooped down and snatched the coveted peanut. One sunny morning, we noted an ominous silence out of doors. Generally, there were calls and cries aplenty, but no sound is quite so startling as sudden, unexpected silence. Not a chipmunk was calling, not a red squirrel chattering, not a bird singing. Giny and I went to investigate. We slipped quietly out of the cabin, hoping to not change the condition until we understood it. We saw Stubby under the corner of the house, still as if he were molded from clay, his eyes fixed on some distant object. Stillmo hung to the side of a tree, obviously hiding. Link had ducked into her home. Salt and Pepper, with quills raised, were slowly and silently waddling under the house. Bluey let out a single cry and flew fast for the mainland. Beggar Boy came dashing out from under the ferns and disappeared into his underground hideout. Something was present on that island that sent a blanket of fear over all our tiny friends. We began a cautious but thorough search. I thought perhaps it was a weasel, and I had no wish to let one of them be at liberty among our chipmunks and red squirrels. We found Meeny, who, like Stillmo, was hugging the side of a tree. In a few moments we found Miney doing likewise. Their position gave me the conviction that the disturbing thing, whatever it was in the trees, not on the ground. As the squirrels were all on the north side of their respective trees, Giny and I walked south, now watching the treetops. Soon we discovered the disturbing visitor. A young golden eagle, glorious in his first year's plumage, perched high in an old white pine tree. Well might our animal friends be cautious when he was around. And what a picture he made, silhouetted against the clear blue sky. For fully 20 minutes he remained there, and complete silence reigned over all the island. Then the big bird spread his great wings and took off. Gracefully he skimmed the treetops and headed determinedly for some distant destination. When he had gone, Bluey came winging back, uttering a cry of defiance which he had been careful to hold while danger was near. Stubby began chirping, and half a dozen chipmunks joined in. Stillmo and Meeny had a brief fight. Mo yawned and stretched on the side of a tree. Eeny began scolding all eagles north of the equator, and Miney chased 2 chipmunks away from a feeding station. Things were normal again. And that's the end of Chapter 9. Come back tomorrow, and Aunt Nikki will bring you Chapter 10 that's entitled A Letter from Duke. See you next time.